Some video game franchises manage to have a long legacy with plenty of critical and commercial success without making much of a dent in the lexicon. Worms is one of them. It's been around since 1995, but Worms Armageddon is considered the height of the franchise, and it was released way back in 1999. Various sequels and spin-offs have tried to recapture that magic. 2016's Worms W.M.D. follows the Armageddon template and has been rewarded by critics for it. It's a multiplayer-focused franchise where players use a wide variety of items and gadgets to survive. But does the formula still hold up over 25 years later? Let's find out if Worms W.M.D. is a game pass or a game fail.
Winners!
Worms W.M.D. is a 2D turn-based strategy game where your goal is to take out all the enemy worms. You do this by reducing their health to zero or by knocking them off the map altogether. You have a variety of weapons, gadgets, and vehicles to shoot, explode, or strike your opponents, and some attacks to form the map. This is important because it removes cover, leaving the worms vulnerable due to their limited mobility. The concept is interesting, and there still isn't much else like it.
Oh, we got lucky there.
The problems begin when you start to actually play the game. The worms don't feel good to control at all. We get that they're supposed to be a bit sluggish. They're worms after all. But the game goes overboard. The jumping mechanic is awful. Even when executing a high jump, the little critters barely leave the ground. Aiming is also difficult to get used to. Instead of using the right stick, you aim by shifting the left stick up and down. There's a time limit for each turn, which makes learning the controls all the more frustrating. It's way too easy to blow yourself up trying to work through it. It also never teaches you advanced techniques. There are plenty of tutorials, but most of them are skill challenges based on the various weapons and vehicles. The single-player campaign is essentially the same exact thing. This makes each stage more of a puzzle to solve than a fun strategic challenge. It also throws the difficulty curve all out of whack. One opening mission has you trying to shoot what seems like inaccessible enemies from a tank. The next has you raining down fire on helpless enemies from a chopper. Most of the skills you learn don't apply to the rest of the game.
It's just wasted energy.
However, Worms games are truly driven by their multiplayer options. Worms W.M.D. has both local multiplayer and a plethora of online options.
I'll take you all on!
The big rub is there aren't enough players to find matches using matchmaking. Instead, you have to use its server browser to connect to a match. This is a problem because a lot of progression is built around playing a lot of online matches. You earn various cosmetics as you play, and there's also a ranked mode. You are thrown into the deep end right away since even the beginner rules supply players with a massive suite of items, weapons, and gadgets to use.
Time to make some big decisions in our little world.
The core of the game is interesting enough. You must plan your shots while adjusting for the wind, surrounding terrain, and what you expect your opponent might do on their turn. It takes a while to master the physics of each attack, so in the early going, it can often feel like luck, especially if you're trying to hit targets at a distance. Matches with more than 2 players can take a long time to complete and feel even more luck-driven. Stages are dynamically generated, while weapon crate drops and health packs appear at random.
Just let it float down from the mountains.
This is fine in casual party situations, but the inclusion of a ranked mode implies that this entry is supposed to tighten things up some. As mentioned earlier, side-scrolling turn-based strategy games aren't very common. Even Worms Rumble, the latest entry in the series that just arrived on Game Pass, abandons the core formula for a real-time battle royale take. There are plenty of traditional turn-based strategy games on Game Pass, whether you want a strategic game like Gears Tactics, or a grand strategy game like Stellaris. But there's nothing in the more casual space that Worms inhabits. If you want a fun multiplayer experience, Overcooked 2 is a fun, frantic co-op cooking game both locally and online. If you want something more competitive, Gang Beasts is a wacky fighting game that makes some gameplay elements feel loose on purpose. Among Us is also a recent phenomenon that's accessible to everyone. Now it's time to find out, is Worms W.M.D. a game pass or a game fail?
Now I'm really cheesed off.
During our time with Worms W.M.D., we've struggled to understand the allure of Worms as a whole. It doesn't explain itself well to new players, and the controls feel awful. It just feels old in general, and its player base is too small to satisfy its ambitions. There's obviously a reason that it's endured for over 25 years, but when its developer abandons its tried and true formula, there's no better indicator that it's time to move on. Its one saving grace is that there isn't much like it, but that's probably for a reason. It can be fun with friends, but there are plenty of better multiplayer options on Game Pass that don't feel like dinosaurs. Worms W.M.D. gets a game fail. Next week, we're looking at games added to Game Pass in June, and the randomizer selects Darkest Dungeon.